may I welcome Melanie Wagner.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you are doing well. I'm extremely excited to present to you survey results that we just launched last week. So hot off the press, and you are going to see something that we actually never presented before. So we are going to look at managing young talent in tech, and we will specifically look at the new generation that is now coming into the workplace. As said, my name is Melanie. I'm the country manager for HiBob for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I'm very passionate about people and culture. I'm passionate about data, so that's why you will see a lot of data on my slides. And last but not least, I'm passionate about generations. I'm not Generation Z, obviously. I'm Generation Y, but I love the role that Generation Y can play in the workplace because I see us somehow as a translation between Generation Z and Generation X and also the boomers, because we have seen both worlds ultimately. We did get our first smartphone when we got 16, but we didn't naturally grow up with it. So I think there's a lot that our generation can do to work with the upcoming ones. So when we look at the current workforce as of today, you can see what it does look like. But we heard it this morning already. Our generation and the workforce that we are seeing is changing significantly. By 2035, 22% of people are going to be 67 years old and with this retiring. And at the same time, the proportion of people that are going to be between 22 years and 66 years old is going to go down to 15%. And what that means is that in Germany, we are going to miss 480,000 people in the workplace. And we heard about that we can only manage this by migration. And it also means for us that with the talent that we are getting on board, we have to manage them very, very differently. That being said, the vision is going to become more and more important. And we will also see this in some of the results that we have gathered, how the company vision is at the core of what we do. But again, if we look at some of the data, CHROs say that company vision is somewhat relevant to the resignation of their employees, but at the same time, 62% of all employees say it is relevant for their decision to leave a company. And that gives us insight into maybe how different we think about work in the different generations that we see. And when we think about Generation Z, who is it that we think about? So first of all, we think about everyone that's born in between 1995 to 2010. In Germany, that is 11 million people. But if I had to pick one icon that describes that generation the best, I would pick a smartphone. 70% of them use it all of the time. It's their number one device. They grew up with it. They don't go online, they live online. It's something fundamentally different. And because of that connectiveness, they are possibly the first truly global generation. I think they are citizens of the world. That's how they see themselves, that's how they live, that's also how they engage within their careers. And because of being connected, their network is the world. They're probably the most tech-savvy generation that we've ever seen in the workplace. And at the same time, they're possibly the best trained that we have ever seen. And last but not least, something that I really like, it's possibly the most female generation out there. And why do I say this? Because if we look at the German gymnasiums, so this is the highest secondary school you can go to, 56% are women that are attending it, while only 42% are men. And I think that is something fundamentally important because I think we can use also more females in tech fundamentally. So when we now look at some of the results that we found from the survey, what is it that we did? So we spoke to 2005 young professionals in the tech industry in 7 countries: the UK, Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands, Sweden, France, and Germany. Yes, I got them all right. And they work in technology companies in between 10 to more than 2,500 employees. And we asked them about how do they see their roles? How do they see their career progression? How is it for them working in times of the economic downturn? And let's look at some of the very interesting facts that we found. So first of all, we did see, of course, that the economic downturn is having an impact on young generation in tech. And maybe that's not going to come as a surprise, but for this generation, it's the first time, next to COVID, of course, that they are experiencing something that is fundamentally changing their life. How do we grow up? We grow up and we are influenced by the time that we live in. They lived in a time where in Western civilizations, everything was fine up until now, right? It was very smooth growing up, no major big crisis, and suddenly we have COVID, and now we have this economic downturn. So they're rating it as an impact on their career. And at the same time, they're not only seeing the impact, but they are insecure about their positions that they're currently holding. So if we combine the numbers here and look at Germany specifically, we can say that 60% either expect to be laid off or they are unsure about their role in the future. What does that mean for us? I think first of all, we as employers having these people as part of our companies need to ensure that they are going to stay with us, or at the same time it may give potential to some of us because we can be that safe harbor that some of them may be looking for. At the same time, this is something that's of course very interesting, is how do you rate your experience of work at your current company? 23% say that it is below their expectations. And when we again think about vision being important and leadership, right, this is something that we do need to be very cautious about. But also, almost 50% say that it does actually meet their expectation, and 30% say it exceeds expectations. So there must be something that we in tech maybe also be doing right at that point of time. And what is it that we're possibly getting right? So here are the top 4 motivations why young generation in tech joined their workplace in the first place. And we see the future potential of the company. So there is that vision again. But there's also the flexible working model. And the previous session was all about this, right? So what can I tell you on top of? But I think fundamentally, again, if we especially think about Generation Z, after they finished school in some cases, they couldn't go to study abroad, right? Maybe they couldn't go in high school to another country because of the pandemic. So suddenly traveling, being abroad, being in different locations, that's a new luxury, and I think it will be one of the core luxury items of our times going forward. It's not that big car, it's not that watch, it's where I can work. And because that generation is truly global, this is going to be extremely important going forward. And then last but not least, also the attractive compensation package. Not surprising, what does this generation look at when they look at a job? They look at salary, compensation, internal appreciation, external appreciation. 3 factors. For us as employers, we always have to know where do we stand in those 3 areas so that we can maybe, if our compensation is not as good, maybe some other things need to be better. But also they know their worth, right? They know how special they are, but they are also connected. Again, there's visibility that maybe some of us were missing when we negotiated our first salary. But what are also warning bells? So what do we need to specifically look out for? And here's some of the things that the generation shared with us when they look at their current work and what they do not like about it. And the thing that I actually almost enjoy about this is that they set no clear career path. Because again, I think this is something that we as companies can work with very, very nicely. This generation possibly is the closest to the Humboldt's ideal of how you can actually work, right? They have that concept of the lifelong learning inherited, right? It's in them, it's what they grow for. So this, to be in place, becomes fundamentally important for us as employers managing this future generation. And there's also the relationship with the manager. Now, we'll talk about this a little later further on, but I don't think it's actually a manager, right? They want someone who's an actual mentor, who is a coach. If I look at the type of conversations I currently have with employees applying from Generation Z with us, it's always about how much do I coach, how much do I mentor. It's fundamentally different in the relationship, but it's also this concept of they know what they can do, right? They have been very well trained and educated. So we need to show them how that journey through the company can actually evolve. One point I actually do find quite interesting, there is not enough time in the office. And if you think about remote work is everything, still there is this piece of wanting to be connected. Maybe that's something very recent because we surveyed in between July to August when we were going already into the phase of this economic downturn. But could it be that in a situation of insecurity in the outside, we are maybe looking at our employers to provide more stability? But that to me is very interesting, just because it tells us that maybe only remote is not the right answer, that you need that connection. And we also heard it this morning about flying the entire team, bringing everyone together, because you do want to feel the people that you are also working with. So we heard about the clear career path, the money, the relationship with that manager. So what does the current companies do to support the career development of the employees? And we see again how important the manager, and I say the mentor or the coach, is actually in the development of those people. But there's possibly also room in here to say there is more that we can do to foster that lifelong learning, to experience this. But the beauty of this generation to me is actually, and this is also what some of the studies show, if you do tests at university and you give Generation Z a task that they've never done before, what are they going to say? Let's do it. I can do it. I'll solve it. And then they go into it head over heels. And when they uncover they actually can't solve it, they say, well, I couldn't solve it, but I know someone who can, right? So they work with that network. They get the people involved. And I think this is something beautiful for us to be using in the future with these employees. So the smart career paths, how do they actually see themselves building their career? And there's always like this perception of Gen Z, either it's the best talent you ever had in the company or it's the most disloyal jobber you can ever have. Look at something. They say that they want to stay at a company for a certain time to gain tenure and seniority. They are committed. They believe in vision. They choose their employers very, very wisely. And if they come on board, they would love to stay. So I think it's our obligation also to support in that. And we can see that this in Germany is actually a lot stronger than it is for the rest of Europe. The one number that I honestly, though, would love to go up is for me the one of actually becoming a founder of a startup, because I think we can use so many more founders in Germany, but overall. And maybe this is also where it tells us something of where we as a country have to invest into, because they do have actually a very high entrepreneurial spirit, but then school, our education, really doesn't allow and foster it. But at the same time, I love the fact of them being committed once they join an employer and wanting to gain tenure and seniority by that coach, by that mentor that they find within that company, and by that career development we are going to give. So what does an economic crisis, though, mean in a situation of not having enough people on the market and us wanting to have them stay. We also asked in our survey, how often are you approached about a new role by other companies? And I think you can quickly ask yourself and check how often it happens to you, but you can see it's often. It's happening a lot. And that also means that there is this constant opportunity to go somewhere else because there is other offerings out there. But if we are connected to our company, will we leave? Possibly not. So we also, of course, asked then, how likely is it that you would actually recommend your company? Because again, if we think about this all being a network, then can you share it, right? And we can see that 35% in Germany will actually recommend. 41% are neutral, 24% will not. I would be very, very, very worried if I was be one of the employers in that 24%, because it means I'm losing someone that's very rare, and I am further enhancing the talent and the skill gap within my organization. And if we then look back at what are they actually looking for, I mean, there is immediate actions that we as companies, as HR leadership teams can take in order to fix this. And then there's another thing that I found extremely interesting, and I find it so interesting because it is also in the comparison of Germany very, very eminent. We also asked them, how long do you actually expect to stay within your current company? So how happy are you in the moment that we're asking you this question? And we can see that in Germany, and this is almost 20% higher than for the rest of Europe, they say that they are going to stay at their job for the foreseeable future. So it could either mean, as a German, Generation Z, maybe more looking at security, because that's, who we are as a country. Could also be an indication if something is right in the tech scene, in this market, in the companies that we are working for, because ultimately I always think that in tech we are also front runners of what we do. So with that, I think we saw some very interesting facts about how the economic downturn actually does have impact on young talent in tech. It is the first time next to COVID that they actually experienced a challenge, something unforeseen in their career, which is having an impact. And I think it will be very interesting going forward to see what that is going to lead to. At the same time, we also saw that job security is actually at the heart of it. Strong co-worker, especially manager, mentor, coach relationships are being valued. Don't underestimate compensation. Yes, while it's not, the car and the watch and everything, it's still that visibility into what everyone else earns. And if they do something, they do it also for the money, right? That's the belief that we have in that generations, and it's very important in their considerations for a company. And I think we very clearly saw that we need to build clear career paths to keep this talent engaged, to benefit from their ideas. I think there's great approaches already out there. I love the concepts of reverse mentoring, right? Involving in important decisions, following along a CEO of a company, talking about how to lead in the future. If I were to look at my generation, I think we should do a lot more listening to this organization, to also learn from them, to benefit from their view of work, because I think there's a lot of healthy things in it. We just heard about how to plan our calendar. I also read a book preparing for this session, and in it it says that one of the Gen Zers always puts at 3 p.m. Their end of day into the calendar every single day. 3 p.m. end of day, I'm gonna go be off. And I was reading it and I was literally thinking, seriously? And then I thought, how cool is that? because she's a leader in a company, she's super productive, and she still has very clear guidelines around when to work and when not to work. And I actually found that inspiring, and I believe with the data that we saw, we have a very inspiring generation coming to us. And with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Melanie. So we're going to pull up the Slido right now. Sorry for being so late. So if you want to ask a question, be quick. I've got two in my mind because I'm confused here. So the code for the Slido, the QR code is going to come up in a second. And the code is 111, but just scan it and you can put in your questions. But I'm confused on two things, right? I think culture nowadays is that Gen Z, they want it all, they want it fast, and otherwise they're gone. Mm-hmm. But you told us we're wrong. Somehow they're very committed, actually. So what is maybe your personal view on where did this perception go wrong?
I think the perception probably got wrong, and they're very clear in articulating what they want and what they do not want. And they're very strict in following their own principles. So that may maybe lead to, if someone tells you that at 3 p.m., right, they're off for the day, I mean, my immediate reaction was, really? And then I thought, how cool is that actually? So I think that's where some of that perception comes from, that they may be illoyal, switching jobs all of the time. But at the same time, I actually believe that they have this vision, that they have this willingness to actually change, to inspire, to build something better, to solve the problems of the future, because no one else is doing it right now, right? That's where a lot of, Fridays for Futures, they do it themselves because no one else is listening. And that's a thing that happens in the job too. So I think if we as employers actually have that strong vision, that corporate culture, and not the greenwashing, right? The truly and honestly, we do it, we care, we want to build something better, we want to create a company that has a bigger mission than just doing X, Y, Z, then I think we have them on board, because that's when they understand that they can do something and change the world they're working in.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, I love that perspective. I start to love the Gen Z also. So a couple of questions already came in, but let me ask the other question that I had in mind first, because I think we all knew that all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, flexibility in work life came in at, let's say, second spot, right? Compensation was always the most important still, and then we needed flexibility. Now you're telling us, for Gen Z, it's really flexibility on one, and even you've broken down compensation into 3 topics. So true pay is, well, I'm not saying it's not important, but that's a very interesting finding, right? How not very important money is, bottom line, for this generation.
I think it is very important, but it's not as important as it maybe used to be for others. And I think if you again look at it, like from some of the history, I think if we look at the situation after the war, everyone was looking for a job and they were doing it to not starve. That's how that generation was brought up. This is very different to the situation all of us are living in. It's a very wealthy, I would say, at least in the Western world, generation that we are seeing come on board of the workplace. And what they do want is they want to earn good money for the work that they do. But that's the period, right? I think there's this clear distinction between there's something else than work in my life, and I'm probably not going to work 50 hours, but if I do it, I at least want to be paid fairly for it. So I think there is still that momentum of it is important, but there are other things that are more important than just the money.
Now the fact that it's fair, right? I think that's a good point. So does this matter that the 4-hour work week schedule is not really like a very great selling point for this generation?
Well, in general, I think we need to discuss, do the 40 hours work, right? Is this how we want to work in future? I mean, if we look at what we need to do in order to keep the entire pension system in Germany running, I mean, there's discussions around, should we now all work 42 hours, or would it even have to be more, right? And I think that is the wrong discussion to be having, because productivity, to me, is not measured in who sits the longest in the office. So For me personally, I think the 40 hours a week are over. There's other ways that we can work, or if they are still there, for me it's the question also on when do you work? If I look at my own team, I don't care when you work, right? As long as you get the job done. And if someone needs 30 hours to get it done, well, great. Then there's someone who's very dedicated and maybe very professional about what they do. Some others may need longer. Someone may be more productive in the morning while others may be at night, right? And then it doesn't matter from where they are having that productivity. So I'd say, yes, please, no more 40 hours. But I think this is also going to be a very interesting discussion with our political system and what we need to secure for future generations in order to keep our pension system running.
Oh yeah, it's definitely improvement, right? If people are no longer sitting in offices waiting for their bosses to leave and then also go home. Yes. So you've already shared some statistics on, well, they want a career path. They want to have a future within the company. But what should then this career path look like more concretely?
I think it may not be outlined as we know it or in the past, right? Is it always the bigger title, right? I go from being maybe an associate and then I become a senior and then I become eventually a manager and I become a director. Is it always that, right? Is that the career path, or is it more about the experiences? Is it about the different skill set I can use? Is it where I can learn? So I think there's going to be a lot more that is happening in the informal, right? And how can I grow as an individual? How can I learn new skill set consistently? Because at one point of time, you are going to be at a certain level and maybe you won't be moving up anymore. So then the question becomes, what can happen in role? And I think there we need to think about very individually what does he or she need and how can we then support that individual in future. So I think there's also going to be more individualization coming into HR.
Very good, thank you very much. So good question also coming in here is, so it's interesting research. Are we going to be able to find it somewhere online?
Yes, you find it online. You can go check out our website. You can also contact me if you want to. We've also published the report. You can then find it also from there. So it is published, yes.
Very good. So she'll be here around anyway for further questions. There's also a question on a book or whatever thing. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there another good book on Gen Z that people should read? Maybe besides from just talking to Gen Zers to understand them, but maybe you don't have a book in mind. Maybe you do.
So there's actually a book called Gen Z, which is great to read. And that's exactly the title. I can recommend it very highly. It's different people, Gen Zers, but also startup founders, managers talking about how they view Gen Z. I loved reading that book. I can strongly recommend it.
Very good. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Melanie Wagner.
Thank you.
So, Punktlandung, they say in German. It's 11 o'clock, at least here in Berlin, so we're going for a break, 30 minutes. And after that, we'll be returning with a very cool panel talking about real estate transformation. Do we need offices at all going forward? All right, enjoy your 30 minutes of break.